so much for joining today's session, How to Build Your Business Case for SRM Software. Sam Jenks here from Kodiak Hub, joined by our very special guest, James Meads. James, nice to have you.
Pleasure to be here, Sam. Thank you for inviting me. Good to see you.
It's typically the other way around. I'm on your network, so it's nice to be able to invite you into ours, for sure.
Yeah, it's nice not to be asking the questions. Yeah.
Well, looking forward to getting into it. We, of course, we've just started the session now a moment ago, and we will continue to wait a moment before the other attendees start piling in, and we will get directly into the content here. I now start seeing some attendees joining, and the clock, of course, has struck 3, so thank you for those that have been prompt. I want to point your attention to the chat line there. Thank you, everyone, again, for joining. If you do have any types of questions during the session about the content or the services of either Kodiak Hub or ProcurementSoftware.site, please make sure to just add those into the chat. If they're just general questions, feel free to shoot those our way as well. During the session, we're going to try and walk through the following agenda. We're going to first introduce Kodiak a little bit, as well as get acquainted with our friend James Meads from ProcurementSoftware.site. We're going to give some background to the new reality that I think we're all experiencing in the new normal in procurement, supply chain, and sourcing. We're going to also start talking about SRM, the opportunities and challenges with that tech transformation, and of course, start trying to figure out how we can build this business case, something that seems to be rather challenging. And we know from the statistics is not an easy task, but it's something that we're looking to help to inspire and educate and empower all of you in attendance today with some best practices, some resources, some maybe levers to be able to pull in order to be able to build that business case internally for supplier relationship management. We'll also finish out with a question and answer session towards the end of the session. And during the session, we will also have, as I've written in the chat, polls that will be launched. So keep your voting fingers ready, because those will be coming hot to see what the attendees have to say about today's topic. Without then further ado, let's get into the day's topic. But before we do so, I wanted to introduce you. James, tell us a little bit about yourself for those in attendance that don't know about ProcurementSoftware.site. And I apologize, I realized that I've spelled procurement software incorrectly. Apologies. Big error.
I like that HQ wherever the sun is shining. Yeah. So hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Good morning, wherever you're joining us from. So yeah, my name is James Meads. I'm a former procurement professional, worked 16 years in corporate procurement in the automotive and then consumer goods industries. Started my career in the UK and then spent most of my professional career in Germany. Done both direct and indirect spend, so I'm acutely aware of how beneficial an SRM solution would have been back in the day when I was in corporate, both from the direct and from the indirect side too, with the different use cases. So ProcurementSoftware.site essentially was an idea that came from really a need that I saw among the procurement community, that unless you have a very large budget to go and pay one of the big analyst companies, it's often difficult to understand the complete breadth of solutions that are out there in the market. So, all of the big boys have got big marketing budgets, and you will see them sponsoring conferences and webinars and events. But if you're a head of procurement and you just want to get a quick, simple, and free overview of all of the different solutions that are out there, nothing really existed that was specifically focused on procurement. And that's what we set out to do. If you go to app.ProcurementSoftware.site, you can search and filter over 430 procurement tech solutions, depending on the primary category or the geography or the size of the software company that you're looking for. We offer services on top. Obviously, we have to make money somehow, but fundamentally, the directory database is free for any simple searches.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, James. And if you guys are not listening to the Procurement Software podcast, absolutely do so. It's a fantastic source of so many different insights and really inspiring stories from people within the industry as well. Let's talk a little bit about Kodiak. For those of you that don't know about us, we are a supplier relationship management vendor in the space of ProcureTech, this fantastic procurement software space that we know and all know and love. Our team is growing in its global capacity as well. We're based out of the Nordics, headquartered here, but also based out of UK, DACH, and now in the United States as well. We're VC backed and also family office backed by part of the H&M family. That's kind of our ownership structure. And we received the investment of $11 million US during the last 24 months. We have a platform that we're very proud of, and I think that our customers can attest that it's a solution that they can love and rave about. So if you are interested in hearing what they have to say, feel free to check us out on Capterra. And of course, we have plenty of accolades to be able to back it up. We also are, of course, amongst the ProcurementSoftware.site procurement map as well, which we're very happy to be able to be a part of. Our solution itself, for those of you that don't know, is a modular one. This makes it a box of chocolates. The solution's capabilities is really a 360-degree view, giving our customers the capabilities to be able to manage supply information, data, and documentation, helping businesses to be able to collaborate and communicate, whether that's corrective actions or elements related to improvements within the vendor base. There's also then analytics and reporting capabilities as well. The rest of the capabilities, as you see, kind of is modular, broken down on the left and the right-hand side of our base functionality of our hub, is focused on feeding our customers with third-party risk insights in various aspects, everything from financial, geopolitical, social, environmental aspects, media screening, and alike, to the modules on the right-hand side of the screen, which are all focused really on excellence within processes, capturing data and feeding insights, but also automating processes and orchestrating those processes that so many teams struggle with being able to centralize today, and helping our customers to turn their information into real insights so they can take more strategic sourcing decisions about their vendor base. Ultimately, our goal is to help our customers turn their vendor base into a competitive advantage when it's all said and done. And we do so typically for businesses that are, hosting global complex supply chains. And our sweet spot is definitely within the space of direct materials. We have plenty of customers, though, absolutely, that are within that indirect procurement as well. Enough about us and more about today's content. I wanted to start today's session by just saying congratulations to everybody in attendance. I think that what we've all seen during the last, 24 to 36 months is that procurement has not just become geopolitical, it's become mission critical to a business. I think that it took kind of a global pandemic, resource shortages, geopolitical problems, crises, and wars. But now procurement's finally got that seat at the table that everybody likes to write so much about on LinkedIn. Don't you think, James?
It's certainly accelerated it. I still don't think we're fully there yet, but our profile's certainly more elevated than it was pre-COVID for sure.
Yeah. And I think that this is something that we recognize, right? There's a lot of new challenges with this professionalization that I think a lot of people like to talk about of procurement, right? The traditional role of cost savings and risk management, it's not going anywhere. We all know that this is still the top level KPIs. In sales, we have to sell. In procurement, there needs to be an opportunity for cost reductions and savings. But what we also see piling up are a lot of new responsibilities that are reshaping the way that procurement teams need to think. The focus on transparency, resilience, and also innovation and impact within the supply chain. I think that we're seeing, of course, with the global situation with tariffs, that this is just continuing to ramp up of the new responsibilities and challenges that teams are being able to focus. I mean, the fact is that we are in a decade of disruption right now. I think that it's requiring a lot of businesses to rethink and reimagine the way that their supply chains look. It's got a lot of teams in a, I would say, rather reactive function and focused on kind of seeing what the next legislation is or the next mandate to come out of the U.S. administration is on a week by week basis, and it's a tough situation at the moment. Now, James, with your ear to the market, I mean, how do you see people reacting to this?
Despair.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, I think, I say that a little bit tongue in cheek, but I think fundamentally, and you're right, Sam, that it's a decade of disruption. We're going through fourth industrial revolution or a fourth turning. It's one of those seismic shifts that happens every 80 or so years within the economy, and it means that we can't have business as usual kind of thinking anymore. We need to adapt a more forward thinking, a more visionary, if you will, idea of how do we want to manage this holistically, rather than just thinking how can we tweak things at the edges. You can't do that anymore if you want to be best in class. Otherwise, you're just going to get left behind with all of the change that's happening.
What is it that Winston Churchill said? Never let a good crisis go to waste, right?
Yeah.
I think that what we saw during the period of COVID, right, is that businesses that invested accelerated and, went digital, went hybrid, changed their way of working. And that crisis kind of forced us to be able to, like you said, think different. And the question I think that everybody has in front of them is, do we invest in the time of crisis or do we pull back, right? And I think that is always kind of what's going to separate winners and losers. And it's a tough balance to be able to have. But the fact is that all of these kind of new expectations is creating kind of an overall layer, right? We're in the face of this kind of shift of total cost of ownership, right? It's not just about getting the best supplier at the best price anymore, right? It's about getting the best supplier with a resilient supply chain that can deliver on time with high quality at the right price. And make sure, of course, that you also have a resilient line of supply so that you could be able to switch out that supplier if something goes belly up, right? And I think that these requirements are creating a new requirement on procurement for something that I think that we sometimes look past, especially in times of crisis, because we're so much on our heels, which is to be proactive and to be agile as well. Now, I want to stop here for a moment and take a quick poll to be able to ask everybody that is in attendance as well. When you're looking at the model as well here, sorry about that. Sharing the poll now. We're looking at the model prior here. I was just curious to hear from everybody kind of what are the biggest focus areas that you have in front of you, the priorities in your procurement organization during 2025? Is it risk management? Is it cost reduction and savings? Is it transparency? Is it resilience? Is it innovation? Has things shifted for you? Curious to be able to hear from those that are in attendance. So please take a moment to be able to answer in the poll here.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it, Sam? While everyone's answering that, because no matter what businesses might pontificate online, usually in times of crisis, and we're seeing it now. I mean, okay, it's a fairly small poll sample, but cost reduction and savings often come to the forefront, don't they? Because in times of crisis, you have to just batten down the hatches and go back to doing what you know. But if you're not doing the other stuff, does it make you long-term resilient? Yeah.
Well, we have seen, though, and I'm not surprised by this poll either. We see now that, of the responses we got in, 54% of the split is on cost reduction and savings. The others are all kind of falling behind 10, 15% as well. Transparency, ESG, product and compliance, right? We were in the United States recently at a conference, and ESG isn't really on the map at all there. But we've actually seen the shift in the EU as well. Is it something that you've also seen, James, within the businesses that you're speaking to?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I certainly agree with you around the US. Supplier diversity has always been more of a bigger issue in the US, whereas sustainability has typically been more front and center in Europe, probably just in terms of politics and political history, in terms of what's driving, and regulation, of course, that's driving that. I certainly see just subjectively online that there seems to be a lot less greenwashing now than there was. Companies seem to be virtue signaling a lot less. The ones that are serious about it, I think, will continue to be serious about it because it's written into their DNA as a business in terms of what they do. But there's definitely a lot less hot air, I think is fair to say.
Yeah, good insights. Beyond, of course, what we're seeing, we recognize that people need to get proactive, right? I think that this is at the heart of it all. And, supplier relationship management is a great kind of program process focus area for businesses within source to pay to be able to help, of course, help a business to be able to go from being reactive to being more proactive, to have that agility, to get closer to the pulse of your supply chain, to be able to not just be managing risk, but ultimately to be driving more strategic relationships within your supplier base as well. But what we also know is that, procurement is drowning in information and needs more knowledge, right? Malin, our founder, she loves to say this particular saying is that SRM will take the same journey that CRM took 20 years ago. And she started this company like most tech entrepreneurs do, right? Once upon a time, she needed it. And she was also fed up with seeing people like me running around in sales and marketing with my glossy CRM solutions that we've had for years and years, and thought to herself, why am I stuck in Excel spreadsheets? Why am I stuck in, my homegrown solution and alike? Why in the heck don't I have the same capabilities that the sales and marketing function has within their particular CRM? And I think that what we've recognized is that supplier management is all too often considered to be supplier information management, right? Data and documentation, and then it stops there. It's all about the master data. And that's very important. It's essential to any good SRM, right? But our focus, and I think that the focus and the mindset shift that needs to occur is, of course, that SRM is not just about the information. It's about creating real insights that businesses can be able to kind of create some type of impact based upon. I want to pause here for a second. We are all amongst friends. Now, when I asked about this during a presentation I gave for about 100 professionals in an ISM presentation a few weeks ago, I asked everybody to raise their hand and ask them if this looks familiar. Are you currently utilizing some type of an Excel spreadsheet or homegrown solution or like for your supplier relationship management? The thing is that I don't need to ask this group. We've asked and polled many times before amongst webinars and alike, because in a study that we did last year with ProcureTech, we found that only 28% of procurement organizations that were polled, and these were with high-performing global multinationals that we polled, the majority of teams were still stuck in their Excel spreadsheets and homegrown solutions for managing supplier relationships. Only 28% had some type of modern capabilities when it comes to supplier relationship management in their businesses. And I think that what we recognize with this is that change is necessary, right? The status quo is no longer good enough. But of course, we need to be able to figure out how to get the split of budget to be able to do it. This is the big problem that we're all standing before, right? Gartner polled and found that only 17% of the technology procurement teams ask for, they get. That means that if you go forward with 10 solutions that you want to be able to buy in the upcoming year, you're only getting one, if not maybe two of them. Now, James, I'm curious, do you see this being a big barrier for the businesses that you're talking to?
Yeah, budget is a big one. But also increasingly when I speak to software providers, they increasingly say that a lot of their sales team, and you can probably confirm this, Sam, as well, but a lot of the resources from their sales team are taken up helping procurement teams to configure a business case to be able to put in front of the office of the CFO or whoever the economic buyer is, because we're between friends on this webinar. Most people joining are procurement practitioners. Procurement doesn't have a budget. They spend other people's money typically within an organization. So that's problem number one. And I think the other issue is that, and it's a good quality in a lot of ways, but procurement leaders have a very stoic mindset. We'll just battle through and we'll deal with what we have and we'll improvise and we'll make use of it somehow. But having that mindset, while it's great in terms of dealing with a crisis like the pandemic or when the Suez Canal got blocked, that's not a great mindset to have if we're thinking, how can we grow and be a best-in-class function? Because we're never going to get there using Excel and SAP or any ERP system for that matter. I'm not singling out SAP as a bad example. So yes, I definitely see that problem.
I think that's interesting, right? We talk about it all the time. It's kind of this aspect of that procurement is a function that's there to save. So why do we invest, right? And I think that the procurement teams and procurement leaders sometimes share that mindset as well, right? We're here to save, so why would we spend, right? And I think that that's of course a mindset shift that's required to change. I wanted to just take a moment to be able to poll the audience really quickly about this particular topic. Have you seen, for example, in the last 12 months, the poll is now launched. In the last 12 months, have you tried to get an investment in a procurement tool and budget was the barrier? Yes or no? Just curious. If you've tried to be able to get an investment, please answer yes or no if budget was a barrier. Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that doesn't particularly. I'll just wait until the until the results come in, but that doesn't particularly surprise me, because if I take a cross section of procurement professionals, especially people in leadership positions, right? Most of them get it. I'd say there's only 20, maybe 30% that are, we've always done it this way. We can manage in Excel. Technology is just hype. We don't need it. Say 70, 80% recognize that there's a need to digitize, but it's only maybe the 10, 20% that are working for world-class organizations and that have really progressive CFOs, and they're very, very good at storytelling to be able to get that budget. And it's a lot easier to do that, as we'll come on to, if you're buying spend analytics or P2P software than it is for SRM, because the business case is a lot more obvious.
Yeah, it's a lot more tangible. It's a lot more quantifiable, right?
Right.
Absolutely. Hopefully we'll be able to leave some people with the tools to be able to build that case out today. This is a post that I had posted a comment on Jason Bush, the prior, he was the founder of Spend Matters, long CEO there. Yeah. He had said that supplier management and the tools there are essential, right? And I just commented here and said, sales doesn't step into the office without their CRM. Literally, I don't. Every single morning I walk into the office, I log into my CRM. Ask anyone that works in sales, it's the exact same thing for them, right? And the question is, so why would procurement do without an SRM? And I got this comment, and I had asked them back to the person, what was the main reasoning that you have not gotten the tools that you were asking for? And of course, with a laughing face, JP Keating said, budget. And I mean, this is the case across businesses, and it's not for a lack of trying, but I think it's also back to what you're talking about, right, James? Is it so easy to quantify the case of supplier management? I think a lot of people would say no, and therefore sometimes it's easier to not, right? What we see from the State of Flux report from 2024 is that only a quarter of respondents to their last year's survey had a business case at all.
Yeah.
So it's tough out there, right? This creates a little bit of a catch-22, right? The CFO says, show me ROI. Then you don't have a tool to be able to show any ROI, and the loop continues and continues.
Yeah.
And I think that this is the loop we need to get out of, right?
But I think that loop is solvable. And one thing that surprises me, and we are getting better at it as an industry, as a function. But I mean, you come from sales, obviously, Sam. You've got a huge network of fellow salespeople that you network with. Procurement historically has been quite closed-minded when it comes to networking with their peers, and I think part of that may come from having ethics rammed down our throat in terms of, don't talk to anyone in case you slip any confidential data out there into the public domain. But salespeople have historically, just by the sheer fact of how many more of them are active on LinkedIn, because they have to be, but salespeople are much better at networking with marketing people too, and much better at networking with one another. Procurement is getting better, and in every country now, certainly in UK, in Germany, in Sweden, in Spain, in the US, you see now that procurement professionals, or even maybe industry associations, are being much more open in the way that they publish networking events. even if it's just a casual drinks meetup that I've organized a couple when I've been in London and just put something on LinkedIn and say, who wants to meet up at 7 p.m. at this pub in central London, and let's just shoot the breeze. And it's starting to happen more, but historically we haven't been good at that. So if you want to get your business case, the easiest way you're going to get it, if you don't have any internal evidence, is to go talk to your peers and look at what they're using. And I'm sure you as a CRO, Sam, or any software salesperson that you're speaking to will help connect you to other customers that can help you put that together.
100%. And I think that networking aspect of it is so important, right? The ability to be able to share with peers is essential. 100%. The thing that we also recognize, though, is that smart SRM and building this business case, it's not just about the technology. We would love to be able to say, the tech is the magic bullet. We're going to be able to take you to the promised land. The fact is that we are just the engine, right? This requires a mindset shift, and this is a model that is as old as time, right? PPT, the right people, the right process, and the right technology. And I think within the overlap of each of these particular elements, there's nice pockets, right? With the right people and the right technology, your people become more data driven. With the right people and the right process, you have clarity and alignment. With the right process and the right technology, you can automate and augment the way that you're working. Of course, with the emergence of AI, you can get agentic even, right? I think that within these three items, of course, lies real value. And I think that if your people, your process, and your technology are aligned within your case, these are, of course, one of the foundations to building a case for SRM or any technology solution. You have to take the people and the process into consideration, and they cannot be forgotten either in that. This is the other element of the mindset shift. SRM historically, and James, we might not see eye to eye on this particular item. I'm curious to hear what you have to say. Historically, right, source to pay has been kind of broken down to source to contract and procure to pay. That's the broadly accepted kind of way of looking at the source to pay process. And even more so, SRM has been kind of embedded as a subset of the source to contract focus or process. SRM is segmentation, determining who the vendors are, what their segment is, onboarding them, getting them qualified, and then of course moving on to execution, contract management, and alike, and moving on within that particular life cycle. What we're seeing though is an emergence of a more end-to-end approach within SRM, similar to the end-to-end approach that exists within a CRM context. This approach requires that we rethink the way that we think about our relationships with our vendors, that they do not start and end, but instead that it is a continuous and ongoing life cycle, similar to the data and the insights that are being managed in our ERP solutions as well. We do not exist in an ecosystem without, for example, integration into an ERP. And I think that says a lot about the way that people value the life cycle of their supplier relationships as well. Now, when I'm saying this, James, knowing the landscape of the technologies that are out there within procurement, how are you resonating when we're kind of talking about this end-to-end aspect?
Yeah, I would broadly agree with what you put there, Sam. I would put a couple of nuances in there. So I would lump supplier relationship management together with post-signature contract management, and both of those together, I mean, you can call it what you want. I would probably call it vendor lifecycle management in terms of when procurement, when people talk about CLM, contract lifecycle management, most of the software that came onto the market for CLM was designed for lawyers. And when they talk about CLM, they mean essentially workflows, contract negotiation, contract authoring, everything up to the point that you put the e-signature in DocuSign or Adobe Sign or whatever system you're using, and then it goes into your contracts repository. Procurement, really, I mean, they're involved in that process, but procurement in terms of being able to ensure that there is no savings leakage, or that the supplier is adhering to the SLAs service level agreement or deliverables as part of that contract, that's all past the point where the contract is signed in DocuSign and it gets shoved into a repository somewhere, whether it's in SharePoint or whether it's in a CLM tool. SRM essentially is post-signature contract. If you take SIM, supplier information management, or vendor onboarding, compliance, due diligence, if you put that to one side, then the true sense of strategic supplier relationship management is essentially post-signature contract management, isn't it?
Yeah, interesting. And I think that, again, it depends upon what it is that you're defining as SRM, right? And what is the SRM strategy that you're looking to take? So I think that what we love to do always is to define, what do we mean by SRM? And I think that this is, again, back to an aspect of telling a story and being able to understand what is the true value that one can be able to gain from the technology, so that we're not just looking at features or clicks, right? But that we're looking at concepts. We like to talk about SRM, broadly speaking, within the framework of our pyramid. It's a model that we built up 4 or 5 years ago and have continued to develop upon, because I think that it pretty much shows off the criticality of supplier relationship management, right? It also shows off that there's different layers and areas within supplier relationship management that both cater to operational or tactical, but also strategic value. And I think that everyone in attendance here that's practitioners could be able to attest to the fact that we're all striving to get to this strategic pinnacle, right? We all want to collaborate and innovate, and we want to drive performance with our vendor base. We want to make sure that we're getting things with high quality, on time, and in full, and our vendors are coming forward with great innovative ideas, and that we're able to drive forward supplier-enabled innovation. The fact is that there's a lot of things that one needs to be able to get right on the way there, right? Making sure that you have the right information, are able to onboard vendors properly, knowing your suppliers from a risk, compliance, and qualification perspective. These are the things that can't be forgotten within the context of being able to manage the life cycle for SRM. And I think that to be able to reach this particular pinnacle, the main thing that we're doing is to have to be able to, again, tell the right story, but also sell, of course, that story to our business. The fact is that unfortunately your CFO or whoever's the budget holder, whether that be the CIO, the COO, the CFO, they don't speak pain necessarily. They speak gain. But I think that one of the things that we often miss out on is the opportunity to be able to sell the story of the cost of opportunity lost. So the way that we framed up this particular part of the session is to not just talk about the ROI, which we're absolutely going to speak about, is to pull on another lever, which is the COI. I think that this is a concept that most businesses actually leave out of a business case and or aren't so versed to be able to talk about, right? What is the cost of inaction, COI, of sticking with the status quo? So what is the cost of opportunity lost if I do absolutely nothing? So the way that we framed this particular session up is to talk about 3 COIs, costs of inaction, and 3 ROIs, returns on investment, for the case for smarter SRM. So James, does it sound like a plan that we get into things?
Let's do it.
Cool. Let's start with the costs of inaction. The way that we frame this up is the way that we like to frame up when we're supporting on business cases, as you mentioned before, which we have to do quite often within our sales processes, is to talk about the cost of inaction from 3 different levels, which is similar to the values that supplier relationship management can be able to deliver: operational, tactical, and strategic. Getting into these one by one, the operational costs of core SRM, we see on average teams that are working with very manual or I would say, operationally task-heavy SRM can have inefficiencies in anywhere between 30 to 50% of an FTE's time on the SRM tasks that they're managing. What does this mean? Well, if we start calculating this, if you're paying on average an individual $80,000 US, you have 20 employees in your team, that means the total cost of your team is $1.6 million. If there's 30% inefficiencies within the activities that they're doing on manual tasks related to supplier relationship management, the cost implications could be pretty massive on the cost of that overhead or the opportunity loss that you're seeing on an operational perspective. So again, what is the cost if you're not automating those aspects? But then James had a very interesting concept that he brought forward called the effective hourly rate, which I think was a even better way to be able to break this down to something so granular and so tangible, which is really how much we're paying per hour. James?
Yeah, and it's something that always blows my mind at how organizations will just tolerate and ignore what I call white collar waste. Because to your example that you just gave, Sam, if you had a machine in a factory that was sat idle for 30% of the time, or that was performing below its expected operational efficiency for 30% of the time, you'd have lean consultants, operational excellence teams crawling all over it. You would have finance throwing capex at it to try and fix the problem. We've got exactly the same thing, but because the resource is people and they're sat on an office chair in a shirt instead of in a factory environment, we just ignore it. I mean, if you take an average procurement category manager's salary of $80,000 or euros a year, which is, if we take DACH, Benelux, UK, it's probably pretty much where it is. If it's US, obviously it's going to be more. If it's Switzerland, it's probably double. But let's just go with that figure. Let's assume that they have 225 working days a year. If we subtract 5 weeks of paid vacation, sorry, Americans, for anyone's listening, and then 10 public holidays, that's 225 working days. So divide 80,000 by 225, and you get a rate of $355 per or euros per day that employee is costing you if you were just paying them on a rolling day rate. That's not including employer social contributions, all of that stuff. Let's keep it simple. So divide that by a typical 8-hour day, and your category managers are earning approximately $44 per hour or euros per hour. Would you go and hire an administrative assistant from a temporary labor agency at 44 euro per hour to copy and paste stuff from an Excel file into an ERP system? Of course you wouldn't. But that's exactly what you're doing if you've got skilled knowledge workers that are wasting their time doing this administrative work. It's something that should either be automated or should be outsourced, because it delivers zero added value to your organization. And we have to get into this more business-focused mindset rather than just this technocratic government bureaucrat type mindset that you've got a number of heads in your team and it doesn't really matter what they do all day because they're all on payroll. You have to stop thinking like that.
The cost of inaction. And I think that this frames it up so nicely. And the EHR is such a tangible way to be able to look at the bottom line and the impact. And I think that if you're looking for a soundbite, for a story to tell, it's exactly what James just said. Would you go out and bring and outsource this for that cost? The answer is likely no, right? And I think that that's a fantastic story to be able to tell. So why are you doing it in your team? Moving on to the tactical costs of poor SRM, what we recognize is that poor visibility increases supplier risk. That's not a tough equation, right? So what we also see is that businesses that have structured SRM processes, the people in place to be able to manage those processes, and technology to be able to back it up, we see reductions from anywhere from 20 to 30% in their supply chain disruptions and quality issues. So if we were to be able to say there's $100,000 associated per incident, and we're able to just avoid 2 of 10 incidents every single year, that's anywhere from 200 to 300,000 in costs avoided per year, based upon the ability to have more visibility and therefore to reduce issues, whether those be quality or delivery disruptions in that case as well.
I think the other point on that slide, Sam, also is what is your opportunity cost, or what is your consequential losses coming out of that? And for anyone from procurement that's listening to this, consequential losses is always the sticking point in contracts, isn't it? But if each supplier disruption, if each production stoppage, if not only should you be calculating the cost of a machine or a factory being sat idle for that time, but what is the loss in revenue? What is the loss in profit? Because those are numbers that finance people will understand. If you say managing my suppliers in Excel is going to cost us $1 million in lost sales and $150,000 in lost profit. They are numbers that they understand. If you're saying it's costing a factory being idle for 2 hours, that's not as hard hitting in terms of speaking to a finance professional.
And I think that goes a little bit more to the top line, the revenue, right? The element that I think is also can be encompassed underneath strategic in a lot of ways. And I want to come back to what you just said there as well. I was speaking to a professional that came up to me after my talk at ISM and asked, I'm trying to sell this business case. I'm struggling. What would you suggest? And I said, have you guys lost a deal because of your supply chain recently? And he was able to point to 2 or 3 particular aspects in which supplier performance or lack of, for example, supplier performance was the reason why they maybe lost out a contract to a larger actor that had a more stable supply chain, a more compliant supply chain, a supply chain that was going to be able to deliver on time and full, that was less risk filled, that was going to be able to fulfill orders better. And that was then, of course, impacting their top line. So go and talk to marketing, go and talk to sales, understand where are we losing deals based upon the impacts of our vendor base, right? And I think that's a great way to be able to frame it as well, James.
I think, Sam, I don't know why, but there's a slide that maybe should be showing that's looking blank on there. I don't know if it's one that you wanted to skip, but I'm just seeing a black screen. That's it. Yeah.
All right. Maybe it was that we were there too long. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah.
Great. I think that the last top element of this cost of inaction of poor SRM, I mean, it's obvious, right? Drop in share price. If there's issues in your supply chain, that's, of course, your vendor base is an extension of your value chain. It's going to come back badly on your brand when it's all said and done. And this, of course, can be able to really shift the way that your brand value and shareholder value looks. And I think that this is talking top line revenue dollars, right? That everybody understands. It is, of course, tough to be able to quantify risk, but utilize examples, tell that story, right? You don't want to be one of these brands. Moving on to the wins, right? The gains, the returns on investment. Starting again with the same framework, operational, tactical, and strategic. And of course, there's some overlaps between these particular elements. But wanted to start with some of those soft, quick wins when we're talking about the return on investment. And James, I wanted to hand the word over to you here.
Yeah, this one is less around convincing finance, but this one's more around bringing your stakeholders on board, because the more people you can get on board the bus to be able to sell this story to ultimately the final decision maker, then the easier it's going to get. So I threw these in really as a bit of hopefully inspiration or ideation for you to help to build some momentum with the wider stakeholder community. These are 10 quick wins that I actually pulled from a blog post that I have on my website around how can using specialist SRM software really help to drive some of the softer benefits. So you've got immediately you're going to have better supplier and spend data because it's all in one single source of truth that's easy to access, that everyone knows where it is. It's not squirreled away on some SharePoint site that nobody knows how to access or they've lost the link. You're going to have fewer emails because naturally day-to-day supplier communication is going to come out of your email inbox and more into the SRM, assuming that it has a nice front end and it's easy to use, something that Kodiak Hub does, for example. You're going to be able to bring that communication into one space. You're going to have a lot fewer day-to-day admin tasks, and you're not going to need to do manual data entry, because if it's an interactive solution that both supplier, stakeholder, and procurement can use together, you're not going to have as much data entry or copy and paste work that's going to come into it. That means inevitably you're going to have more space, you're going to have more time freed up to do strategic work. That ultimately means, if you're freeing up time, if you work on the assumption that the average category manager is going to bring in 10 times their salary in savings, if they're spending a third of their time on non-value added tasks, it doesn't take a genius to calculate what that effect is going to mean. We touched already on the one single source of truth. Suppliers, we often don't consider our suppliers in these decisions when we go and buy software. And there's a very famous source to contract, source to pay suite that's owned by one of the big ERP systems. I'm not going to name them, but you can probably guess. But pretty much everyone in procurement that I know hates using it, but nowhere near as much as suppliers hate using it. Give your suppliers a good user experience and they will reward you by treating you as an A customer. If you make their lives difficult, then they're not going to move heaven and earth when you have a crisis and you need them to react. Number 7, so this is more around really spend analytics tools, but again, you can see it with SRM as well, that if you've got a lot of the hard KPIs and supplier performance management in there, then it's going to improve the relationship between procurement and finance, as well as make it easier and more objective to measure KPIs. Obviously, if you're getting your SRM data out of spreadsheets and into a proper tool, you're going to have less human error because there are no formulas in Excel or Google Sheets that you can break easily. And all of this together is ultimately going to mean there's less friction with stakeholders because you're not dealing with data in different silos. You've got it all in one central space. So as long as your stakeholders and your suppliers are onboarded properly, the storytelling is done properly as part of the journey of bringing them on board of this new way of working, then you're going to have less friction with stakeholders and also hopefully with suppliers too.
Yeah, fantastic. And like you said, nice to be able to rally the troops because, of course, change is going to need those kind of, evangelists of that change as well. And getting as many people on board is incredibly important. What are some of the things that we see, of course? Well, we've had cases in our customer base where we've seen anywhere from up to 80% faster onboarding and due diligence and qualification based upon the enhanced insights and automation capable within a smart SRM solution. This is just one of the examples of the way that it can operationally deliver ROI. And we have use cases and case studies on our website with, for example, HL Display that show some of these exact results. When it comes to a tactical perspective, we see that you are able to improve your overall negotiation power, right? It gives you more muscles. It gives you the opportunity to go into that QBR with more insights. The fact is that sales, customer success, those businesses, right, that are managing the project from the other side, the supplier side, they are coming into your QBRs with a lot of insights on you. They're coming in there with a lot of information. You need to be able to make sure that you are armed with the exact same level of insights to be able to come in and reduce, of course, your overall total cost of ownership. And of course, there's this other aspect, right? It gives you more control. So of course, with better compliance within your organization, within your data, with the ability to be able to consolidate in your ways of working, hopefully it'll also reduce Maverick spend. Back to, for example, what James was talking about, the ability to be able to have more stakeholders on board, the ability to be able to control your vendor base in a central space, hopefully would be able to reduce those spend that's happening, randomly when you start seeing $1,000 here, $1,000 there popping up. And I think that if you quantify this economy at scale, right, that can create a lot of savings per year. The last element is a strategic element. I think that we all too often look at our vendors as just that, right? Vendors, they supply us. There's demand, they supply. Research suggests from ISM that anywhere between 55 to 65%, and sometimes this is higher in certain businesses as well, of innovations and new products are sourced through external suppliers and partners. This means that our suppliers ultimately are an extension not only of our value chain, but our revenue generation models, right? And I think from that perspective, we need to look at them as strategic partners and find those pockets where we can be able to see enabled innovation. And this is a great level of ROI. And it talks a lot, I think, again, back to the ability to be able to deliver not just savings, but also gains, as you were talking about before, James. Now, James, you have provided us here with a little bit of a Excel sheet to be able to calculate some of these different types of ROIs.
Yeah, and this is not rocket science. It's something that maybe took me half an hour to put together in terms of explaining how cost reduction and revenue increase are equally important. And I mean, I would say that you can't cost cut your way to greatness. You know, if you're working with suppliers and you're expecting them to reduce their prices 3% year on year, you know, they're not going to be able to do that as a world-class organization and then still invest the necessary resources into things like R&D and research and innovation. But this shows a $5 billion company that has a pre-tax profit of a margin of 15%, so $750,000 profit. And that's pretty standard in a large mid-market industrial manufacturing company. That's probably going to be what you're working with. So it's really to show that what would you have to do to have the same effect on the bottom line if you look at revenue versus cost reduction. So this shows that to increase your revenue by increasing your sales revenue by 10% would bring you a bottom line impact of $75 million. That same $75 million can be delivered by a 3% blanket cost reduction across all of your supply base. Now, obviously, not all of your supply base is going to be able to go. You're not going to be able to go and find 3% saving in all of your supply base. Some of that spend is going to be locked under contract. It's not going to be sourceable. It might be with monopoly suppliers or with state-run companies that you can't really negotiate with, especially in Europe. But okay, maybe you can go and get like 30% saving on things like generic MRO spare parts or on IT peripherals, whereas you're probably going to be facing price increases on something like energy. But it just shows that to get an across the board 3% cost reduction delivers the exact same effect to the bottom line than a 10% increase in sales. But who are the ones that are always the heroes when they bring in new contracts? It's the sales folks, right? And don't get me wrong, as someone that runs his own business, I know that selling something and closing a new client is bloody hard. But equally, it's not a walk in the park to go and get a 3% saving either. But procurement is kind of expected to do that year on year. And I just think if we can work to drive both top line revenue in terms of working with supplier innovation and supplier R&D on the more strategic end of the pyramid that you showed, Sam, and I love that graphic. That goes hand in hand, and that's the business case that you need to push to your finance colleagues. But at the same time, some of the more tactical and day-to-day operational savings that you're driving is going to be tapping away at that 3% that you're delivering week in, week out. And while you're often the unsung heroes for that, and that's never going to give you the business case on its own, you have to include that together with the innovation and the soft savings and the UI UX benefits of having good data and everything all in the one place as your holistic business case that you're driving to the business. Because there's a reason why companies like Apple and Meta and Google and Amazon are so successful, and that is essentially because they're data companies.
So well said. It has to be bottom down and top up at the same time, right? Focus both, like you said, on revenue generation and also the cost savings. It was very well put. Now, I wanted to give the opportunity, say yes or no if you would like to receive the cost/spend model that James has just provided us here with, showing us then kind of what the percentage in savings is to be able to liken to that of sales. If you'd like this model, James has been very kind. He said that they'll be able to share. Like he said, it's not rocket science, but it's always nice to be able to have the template, of course, anyways, there, James. So thank you so much for that. If you'd like that particular Excel sheet, please just say yes to the poll that we've just issued now. I think that what you brought about there, though, is also important, right? It's about the return that we can gain beyond just the transactions that we have with our vendors. And I think that top performing procurement teams also recognize that there is a value to becoming, like you said, the customer of choice. And I think that that's equally as essential. And we see that, of course, businesses are focusing on how they can be able to define and redefine the relationships that they have with vendors, as per what we see in the statistic from the State of Flux survey from 2024. Procurement is not just about cost savings anymore, it's so much more. And I think that in this turbulent post-tariff world, right, we have to be able to have the smart processes, people, and technology at our fingertips. And we need to determine, are we going to fall over, right? Are we going to be on our heels? Or are we going to go on the offensive, right? And invest through the crisis and not let it go to waste. With that being said, I want to thank everybody for the time. I appreciate it. And now we're going to move over to a session of Q&A. But before we do so, I'd also like to share that if you'd like to book a demonstration of what we're doing at Kodiak Hub, then please feel free to do so. James, how would people get it best in touch with you if they'd like to learn more about your services at ProcurementSoftware.site?
Yeah, thanks, Sam. The easiest way is just to connect with me on LinkedIn or drop me a DM, and happy to connect with anyone. Just mention that you were on this webinar, just so as I know where you're coming from and the context. And yeah, would be happy to connect with anyone there.
Yeah, fantastic. Again, if you'd like to be able to book a session with the team at Kodiak Hub to be able to understand more about how our solution works with delivering value and smart SRM to our customers, feel free to be able to do so. The link is now launched. Otherwise, though, we have then shifted over to the Q&A session. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to put them into the chat line now. We will mark those particular questions and answer them live as well. So James, we've got a question from Oscar here. It says that we've talked a lot about being supplier-centric, but most companies focus on being customer-centric. Can you really do or be both? It's a good question, right? And where do you usually see the biggest mindset blockers when rolling out SRM? Now, James, from your perspective, what are you thinking here?
Yeah, I'm thinking it's really ironic because the companies that get this and that invest in SRM and that really take this seriously are usually already high margin companies. The ones that seem to struggle with this and that treat their suppliers very transactional in a lot of cases are the low margin commoditized businesses that could really benefit the most. So it's kind of a paradox that the ones that need it the most are the ones that don't see the added value. But to answer your question, Oscar, can you really do or be both? I think you can, but I also think, especially thinking of this from my automotive days, that there is a danger of being too accommodating to suppliers. And if you roll over and have your belly tickled by suppliers and let them walk all over you, then that's not good either. So I think you have to do it with a long-term mindset. I don't think if you're trying to do SRM properly, then you can't have like a Donald Trump style of negotiation. It's just not going to work. But you can also be a little bit too soft as well. And, certain cultures and negotiating styles may get walked all over if they're negotiating with suppliers from quite direct and very hard negotiating cultures.
That's good insights. Thanks so much for sharing, James. If there's any other questions, please feel free to be able to drop those in the chat line now, and we will make sure to answer. Thank you, Oscar, for your question. Doesn't seem as if there is any more questions at the moment. What I wanted to also be able to give everybody the opportunity to do is to be able to directly download some of today's deck. So if you said yes, of course, for the Excel sheet, we'll make sure to get that in your hands. If you'd like the deck that was presented today, feel free to download that now, and we can be able to, you can be able to grab that PDF right away. And again, like I said, the Excel will be coming your way following this session. That will be sent over by James directly. If there's no other questions, I'd like to just take a moment to be able to say thank you very much, James. Appreciate the time and effort that you put into today's session. Thank you for coming and dropping some knowledge. Any last words from your side for our audience?
No, great to be with you, Sam. Always a pleasure. And yeah, like I say, if anyone's got any general questions around SRM, not necessarily related to Kodiak Hub, then just drop me a line. Happy to help.
Great. Thank you so much for your time. Have a good day, everybody.